So welcome and thank you for coming. We have a great set of alumni panelists here to share their experience and answer your questions on the topic of biohealth and biotech. As we go through the presentation, students, please feel free to type out your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll call on you and get those questions answered. We're going to start out by asking each alumni to give a brief overview of their career path and their current role, and then we'll open it up for questions. So we will go through the alumni in alphabetical order, and we'll start with Amy.
Alex, I'm always first. I can go first. So hi, my name is Amy Chung. I'm the Associate Director of Medical Writing and Transparency at Jazz Pharmaceuticals. I graduated from UW-Madison with my PhD in pharmaceutical sciences in 2009. And then I went to postdoc at UCLA, where I confirmed I wanted to leave the bench and go into industry. And then I joined industry working for a medical device company as a medical writer, doing artificial heart valves, since I've been in the cardiac space for a little bit. After a few years there, I went on to NeoStem, stem cell company for various cardiac related heart failure diseases. So I skipped over to the pharma sector, pharma/biotech sector then. And then after that, went on to Amgen for a few years, and then joined Celgene, which was later acquired by Bristol Myers Squibb. And then after that, I joined Jazz Pharmaceuticals, and I've been here a couple of years. So that's it for me.
Great, thank you, Amy.
I'll turn it over to Alex. Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, good morning. Nice to meet you all. Alex, I'm the CEO of a startup company here in Madison, Wisconsin called Cell Logistics. I'm born and raised here in Wisconsin, did my undergrad and graduate work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, back in microbiology, bacteriology. First jobs really that I had out of college are with Pfizer and Abbott doing drug discovery work. And then I got an opportunity to join a startup company back in the 90s here in Madison. And so, you know, that was a really great experience. 10 years later, we sold the company, which is now it's all rolled into Thermo Fisher, which is a huge monstrosity of a company. But now I've done small startup companies and early stage companies ever since. And Cell Logistics is my 6th one. I might even be taking on a 7th as CEO. And what I do day to day really is I help these companies strategize around how to raise money and how to commercialize their technology, and ultimately, you know, growing the companies into revenue-generating entities that someone would take an interest in collaborating, working with, buying product from, or acquiring.
Great, thank you, Alex. We'll go Jennifer next.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Loeb. I am a Senior Global Market Segment Manager for Academic Government at Formica Corporation here in Madison, Wisconsin. Like Alex, I am a born and raised Wisconsinite. I am a very proud 2-time UW alum. I have a bachelor's degree in biochemistry and a master's degree in biotechnology from UW. I would say I have more of a similar path or winding road to how I got to where I am today as what Amy described. So when I graduated with my bachelor's degree from UW, I spent a couple of years working at the bench doing research for 2 labs at the School of Pharmacy at UW, and then moved on into industry where I worked in R&D doing product development for a company that was acquired by Thermo Fisher Scientific. Like Alex had mentioned, it is a behemoth of a company, and I was developing proteomics products for researchers who study proteins. I then moved into pharma and was hired to do drug discovery research, develop assays for a cardiovascular program at Gilead, and then moved on after a site closure to going back to Thermo, doing siRNA product development. And after about 10 years, moved back to Madison, enrolled in the Master's in Biotech program, while I was doing that, I was running a large 30-person lab at UW in the biomedical engineering department. And then about 3 months before graduation, I took a leap of faith, moved away from the bench, and took a position in marketing as a product specialist at Promega Corporation. And I've kind of moved around within marketing ever since.
Great, thank you for sharing. Viva, would you like to go next?
Sure. My career path has been a little bit more linear than some of the other presenters today, but my name is Viva Valentine. I'm a group leader at PPD. My team focuses primarily on pharmaceutical method development and validation, which means we are extremely R&D in our work. My team and I help clients develop methods that are suitable for the validation of their products to go onto the FDA. So my career started at UW-Madison when I got my bachelor's degree in biochemistry. I then have continued my education at UC San Diego and then returned to Madison, Wisconsin like 10 years ago. I got my start in the industry of pharmaceuticals as a bench analyst at a local Verona, Wisconsin company. From there, I went on to the formulations department of that same company, which involved a lot of hands-on pharmaceutical formulation type work, which involved working with clients, helping them determine what sort of excipients and different structures that they wanted in their drug products to achieve the goals that they were looking to achieve. I realized pretty quickly on that the bench work was not something that I was super interested in. I enjoyed the science, but I wanted to get more into lab management. So I moved to PPD and I accepted a group leader position, which means that I do a lot of the paperwork science. I don't go into the lab a whole lot anymore, but I oversee a fairly large team of analysts of all education and experience levels. So that's where I am right now. As I'd mentioned, my career path has been a lot more linear, so I don't have tons of job hopping. So I've been at PPD now for quite a while. So I'm loving it. And as many have mentioned, Thermo Fisher, PPD was recently acquired by Thermo Fisher. So I will soon be a Thermo Fisher employee in addition to PPD.
Great, thank you all so much. So now that introductions are done, we're gonna open up the floor for question and answer. Does anyone have a question right off the bat? Otherwise, I have a few.
I do. First of all, I just want to say thank you all for being here today. I just had kind of, I guess, general questions about most of you seem or like went on to some form of like grad school and got your master's or PhD in some field. And I guess I was just curious about like what was like the main motivators behind that? Was that like to get like a certain job that you wanted, or because like you realized after like working for a few years that like going back to school would help you like achieve more of what you wanted to do? Or I guess just like general like curiosity about why you chose to continue on.
I can speak a little bit to that. I did not go straight into grad school right out of my undergraduate, which I got at UW-Madison for biochemistry. I did go into the field right away. One, because I wanted to eliminate the little bits of student debt that I did acquire in my undergraduate, and I wanted to get some real world experience to kind of figure out what I was trying to do. I didn't end up going back to grad school. And the nice thing about the path that I took in doing so was my company at the time supported me financially through that. So they did reimburse me for many of the classes that I took or the books that I had to pay. The reason that I did end up going back was because I had solidified what I was truly interested in. I'm not sure had I gone straight to grad school right after my undergraduate, I would have known exactly like what I wanted to do or what all was in the world. So I wanted to take that time to explore the industry a little bit and explore my interests as an employee and see where I wanted to end up. And that helped me solidify what and where I wanted to go. I think in many scientific industries, you can be extremely successful with a bachelor's degree. You can go on to have many jobs with a bachelor's degree, but there are going to be doors that are opened by having some of those upper level degrees as well. So I wanted to see kind of where some of those doors led for my future career growth, which is why I did decide to go back. That and having it paid for by a company is a perk.
Definitely.
I
And
compare to what Viva was saying. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I appreciate you saying that because I feel like grad school is such a big decision, and I appreciate you saying that you wanted to like take time in the field first, because I feel like that's something that's really important to hear instead of just like rushing into.
Yeah, I've been extremely fortunate in my graduate career. I interacted with people of all different backgrounds and ages. So, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking some time to work and go straight into the industry of your choice and see what it is, you know, what's out there, what are you interested in? And more importantly, a lot of companies like PPD or others listed are willing to support you financially. You can have a salary, you can have a flexible work schedule, and you can be getting some of your tuition reimbursed if you don't have that scholarship behind you, or you know, other forms of payment behind you. So it's definitely worth, you know, I think pausing and seeing, you know, what's out there if you're unsure.
Yeah, being the kind of the fossil of the group here. um, the reason I went back is because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I mean, it was the mid 80s, and biotech wasn't even really a thing in the 80s. And so we were all kind of wondering how this is going to evolve, and there weren't that many jobs out there. And so, you know, I kind of said, well, you know, what do? I'll go back to grad school, learn a little bit more about what I'm interested in, and see how that pans out. And the practical result of that is a couple of things. One is I worked a little bit too prior to going back. And you know, I think part of it was that then the industry started to form, and there's a little more direction in what we were doing. And so as you think about this today, you know, one, do you want to be a scientist, you know? And if so, additional training. And I like the approach of going to a larger company and getting them to spend some money on you to really train you, and you get a flavor of what it's like to be in the lab, right? And if you don't, I didn't like it. And so the nice thing about me going to Pfizer and Abbott is what I've learned is that you know, the additional education got me a better position, got me more money. But at the end of the day, I didn't like being in the lab, and I switched over to the scientific side. So that's one thing, is do you like being in the lab or don't you? The second, I think, consideration is, do you want to work for a big company or a small company? And the first thing is, you go to work for a big company, you know, they train you, they help you maybe pay for more school, and that's a big plus. But you're also kind of a number, you know, it's you can work, you know, 50-hour, 60, 70-hour weeks and really kill it, while someone else is maybe working as smart or as hard as you, and everybody gets the same kind of raise, right? So to me, I didn't like that. I like getting into a smaller entrepreneurial environment where what you do every day, you can see, it makes an impact on the organization, and it's just much more satisfying to me. So two things: do you want to be a scientist or don't you? And there's plenty of avenues now if you don't want to be a bench scientist in biotechnology, much more so than you know, in yesteryear. And then also, do you want to work for a big company or a small company? And maybe the third consideration is do I want to manage people or don't I want to manage people? And you know, there's folks who've gone the scientific route and then gone to the MBA or some non-scientific graduate studies, and others who've gone to the master's in biotech, which, you know, I was involved with for a long time in giving, in lecturing on marketing and sales, or in the HR components of it. And I think that's a fantastic program if you can get into a company that will help support you in that, as Viva said. I mean, that's really kind of a nice way to go, and you don't have to really hurry through. You just kind of learn that you know, all the different aspects of what you could do with a scientific background.
Well, definitely, thank you. Those are awesome considerations as I like think about my future and really decide and hone in on what I want to do. So thank you.
Amy, I saw that you had unmuted. Did you have anything else you'd like to add to that? Or Jennifer?
Yeah, Kat, what stage are you? Are you undergrad, grad, or what?
I'm an undergrad student. I'm in my senior year though, and I'm really just kind of trying to figure out what I want the next year or 5 years to look like for myself. So that's why all these information sessions with all these different professionals are super awesome.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I took a sort of a different path than Viva and Alex, and I'm not sure about Jennifer, but I went straight to grad school from undergrad. I just fell in love with biochemistry in undergrad, and I knew I wanted to just go as far as I could in exploring the path, you know, as a biochem nerd. And so I joined grad school, loved the research part, uh, you know, just loved the thinking and the training behind, you know, why, just all the philosophical angles of a research and experiment. Um, but it always kind of was in the back of my mind that I wasn't quite helping patients in a real practical setting. You know, research is rewarding in itself, but it didn't quite translate to the real world setting for me. And there was that gap that I was missing. But because I loved writing grants and you know, was successful at it, and I had an NSF at the time, I thought it would be a real shame to walk away from it when I could use that as kind of a foot in the door to a professor position. So the reason I went into a postdoc was just to really verify that I really didn't want to stay at the bench anymore. And I definitely verified that I didn't want to stay at the bench anymore. I mean, I think it always was in the back of my mind, and it just that voice of how am I helping patients in a real world setting was always growing bigger and bigger through my postdoc fellowship. And so you know, that's when I kind of decided to assess what I was really good at, the key talents that I could bring to the table, because there's so many positions in industry. I think what Alex was pointing out, you can be an individual contributor, you can be a manager, but there's so many different niches that you can pick that isn't really apparent to folks in academia, to students, you know, whether they're undergrad or grad students. So it's kind of a big black box out there. But there are lots of different areas you can target and join. You know, if you can just hone in on the sector that you're a good fit for and you might be interested in, and then also your personality and your skills on top of that. So for me, it was I'm really good at writing. I love the data and I love the science. You know, how can I join it? To me, that was medical writing, which was a clear path for me. And you know, I
So
wouldn't tell my boss this or my employer this, but I could do this for free every day. So it's my calling.
Yeah, if I could interject, that Amy brings up two additional practical kind of thoughts, considerations. One is industry versus academia, right? Do you want to really be an academic, write a lot of grants, fund the grant work and do research, or in industry where it's a little bit more of an applied science where you can actually see products and, you know, and or therapies, you know, devices actually make it to patients. And then the fifth practical consideration is really, it says know yourself. You know, not everybody is in my case, I was not really cut out to be a scientist, to, you know, I'm a people person, and I don't like to be, I like to be around people. And so managing was a part of what I enjoy doing, as opposed to just being in the lab focused on where you can really focus on your own research projects and you get satisfaction out of that. That's great. I couldn't do that. And so you got to know yourself, and you will over time when you start testing some things out, right? So test out a job. Maybe that job gives you the opportunity to grow into a more responsible position. And maybe you like it, maybe you don't. Then you decide, well, maybe I go to grad school now or later. Do I want to be in industry, academia? So it's just know yourself. Don't strengths and weaknesses are, you know, it takes you a while to figure that out. But you just got to try it. And don't be afraid to fail or screw up, because that's kind of how you learn, you know, and you'll learn about yourself that way too. Is, well, maybe I'm not so good at doing that, but I really am good at this. And I really love doing this. So you got to go that way.
Definitely. Thank you. I totally understand that. It's like definitely an ongoing process of learning yourself. I've learned a lot about myself in undergrad, but definitely still a lot more to learn and more directions to take from there.
That was a great question, Kat. We've had a few more students join. So just as a reminder, feel free to enter your questions into the chat or use the raise hand function, and we'll make sure that our alumni have the opportunity to answer those questions. All right, so a question that I have for our alumni is, what are some things you wish you had known at graduation that have been valuable in your career?
I've got a couple things. One thing is, one of the most important things that I think we take for granted, especially as we're coming out of school, is, we have this idea of what kind of job we want and what that ideal position looks like. And we don't take into consideration that a lot of what makes up a job, and I would say for most people, a lot of what helps them get a lot out of it and learn and makes it really enjoyable is the people around them. So when you're getting set to graduate and you're getting set to interview and such, really listen to yourself, like little pings in your gut, just your body that's maybe saying, I don't really like these people, or something like that, because that will have a big impact on your overall happiness and enjoyment and growth within a position and at a company. So even if it seems like the greatest job and just the perfect job, but the people suck, or you don't feel really good, you feel like, your boss is going to micromanage you and you're not good at that, or maybe it's on the opposite end of the spectrum, like you're not going to get a lot of guidance from your boss and you prefer more guidance. Like, listen to those little subtleties, and that comes from some of the things that Alex had mentioned. You grow and you learn, but just keep in mind, just because it sounds like the ideal job, yeah, that's going to play a lot, but the people at the end of the day you're going to work with are really what are going to make that job enjoyable and fun and give you opportunities to learn.
Yeah, I second that. I think, in an interview, I've interviewed probably hundreds of people, and what always fascinates me is how focused even the interviewers from the company level are focused on all the little detail in the resume. It's like, oh, did you do that? Well, you didn't run that kind of experiment or this kind of piece of machinery, or you weren't involved in this kind of process, so I don't think you're a good fit. As opposed to, do they fit the culture of the company? Do they fit, do you get along? I think we have a joke in our family. It just says, what the best thing about the world is people, but it's also the worst thing about the world. Get rid of all the people, the world will be fine. But that's, people always come first. You don't live and work in a vacuum, right? And so I'd much rather take a cultural match to the people that they'll be working with than even experience sometimes, or even technical aptitude, because you can train some of that. That's kind of easy. Maybe you send them to a course, you support them in their educational efforts, things like that. But you can't, change. People need to be team-oriented, unselfish, helpful, kind. All those things make or break a team. And it's so true. So I think Jennifer has it spot on.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, the industry hopping, I guess the job hopping is kind of more common. I think especially in the West Coast and in biotech, it's not uncommon for folks to kind of jump around every few years. And especially, for a medical writer, for my background, we go through these big submissions to the FDA or another, health authority. And then you're just kind of sitting and celebrating, but then at a certain point, it's a little bit slow. And so you start kind of having that luxury to look around, and there's always recruiters kind of contacting you. So, I think if I have to look back, your career kind of only makes sense in hindsight. But I think looking back, I was really jumping around to find the right culture. And so if I have to look back, I've been at big companies for the most part, but I think I was always looking for that work hard, play hard culture. And so, initially in the beginning, when you're just graduating, it's a little bit hard to pick and choose in the beginning because you have to build that experience. But as you build your career, I think it's, as Jennifer pointed out, you spend a lot of time working alongside your coworkers. And if the people suck and they don't make your life rewarding, you just, your work is the work, and you'll always strive for excellence, personally, but it's just not going to be fun and not sustainable. So yeah, those are the two. And culture is definitely important.
I guess the only thing I would like to add is, if you're just graduating, the likelihood that you're fairly young is pretty likely. There's no rush to start your career. One thing that I did that I do regret doing is I jumped straight into a career that I'm still in today. And I love my career. I love the career growth that I did, but I do wish I had spent some time in that period in my life exploring interests and seeing what else is out there in the world. So, if there's any concern or hesitation, don't be afraid that your career is not going to exist if you don't start it by the time you're 22. You can start a career. I have fellow coworkers who restarted their careers in their 50s and they couldn't be happier. So your career and career opportunities will always exist. There is no necessity to jump into that career the minute you graduate. Don't be afraid to take some time to explore who you are, what interests you. I wish I hadn't started my career as quickly as I did. Not that it was a bad way to start, but I wish I would have taken some personal time to see other things.
Yeah, and to echo Viva's point, I think it's excellent that students are here in this call, just exploring different options and really learning about what's out there. I think, not to date myself, but back in our day, we didn't have these online resources. We didn't have massive online classes that we could explore different topics, different careers. We didn't have half the resources, right? We would go to a library, physically check out a book, like alternative careers, and it was really inefficient. And the black box was even darker for us than now. But there's so many resources. There are all these career panels, and there's all sorts of online resources that are available, and courses that you can take and put on your resume actually without leaving the comfort of your home. So it's I definitely think it's great that the students are here in this panel discussion, and I would, if you're, I would just encourage you to just do the same thing and just continue exploring.
Yeah, maybe another thing even to think about is, this can be a scary time. I think, you're graduating and maybe you've got different pressures saying, oh, I got to have a job, or I need money to live. I don't want to live with my parents till I'm, 50, things like that. And I guess, back then, what I noted on the positive side of myself is that, I was a risk taker, right? And I didn't really realize I was a risk taker. And by that, you got to understand yourself a little, say, what you got to have a confidence, so everybody's afraid of things, and confidence isn't so much that you got to feel confident before you do something. It's to say, I'm going to do something and I know that I'll figure it out, and I'll either figure it out where it works out great for me, or I'll figure it out so that I got to make a change. And so don't be afraid, just go out there, and especially when you're young, try different things. I mean, there's no failure, right? It's don't feel like just because you took a job and after a year it didn't work out because of X, Y, or Z, you're not a failure. That you actually learned something to say, well, I really didn't like that place, or I didn't like that job, and that's a big success. That's, to me, that's a step forward. So don't be afraid. Just get out there and mix it up. I mean, it's really not that bad out in the real world. You just gotta go out there and be confident in your ability to, figure it out for yourself. And I think most of you will figure it out quite nicely, actually. And then there's really no set path for anybody that you can, other than just keep at it, keep going at it, keep I guess resiliency, tenacity are really things that I think will help you in life. So those personal skills, leadership skills, I think are things that you'll build over time. And those at the end are the most valuable, not necessarily just technical skills or knowledge.
Great, thank you all for those answers. Very insightful. We have a question from a student in the chat about how does having a master's or a PhD degree relate to salary and other better or more highly desired positions?
I think you're probably going to get different answers from everyone in this group. And it will kind of depend a little bit about what sort of field you're looking for, what sort of job you're looking for, what sort of interests you have. I will say, you do say high pay. The likelihood that that's going to come with a degree right off the bat, in my experience, is pretty minimal. Typically, in my experience, it's going to be time in the industry that's going to contribute the most to your end salary. Are there exceptions to this? Absolutely. But honestly, I think you're not going to probably find an answer that's going to satisfy every sort of career option out there. You might have to evaluate a little bit closer to the field that you're looking at going into. I don't think, from the question that I see, I don't think you're associating anything with a field or a specific area of study. So it can be very different depending on what field you're going into, what sort of jobs you're looking at, what sort of requirements and what sort of individuals are currently out there, what sort of businesses are out there, what those business models are looking for in future candidates for their positions. So maybe other in this team can speak better than I can, but that's very broad.
I would just say that should not be your motivation. I think getting an advanced degree simply to make more money is kind of a bad approach. I think, getting an advanced degree because, as Amy said before, you really love the science. You really, are into it, and that's something you enjoy doing. Well, that's why you do it. And I think in general, yes, there are jobs that pay more because you have a certain degree level. Sure. And in the entrepreneurial world, it doesn't really make a difference what your degree is at all. I was trying to get my MBA too, but I changed companies so often. I just said, now I got a street MBA. I just learned it on my own. I went out there and I just mixed it up. And my salary, I'm doing fine. So it's not like, just got to do what you love really first. And if you love the science, but you don't like the lab work, well, there's plenty of other places to go with the science that I think you'll do fine in.
And just to kind of put a different spin on that. Oh, go ahead. Was someone else speaking? Sorry, is it just me or the internet connection kind of a little bit slow and glitchy?
Yeah,
is that just me?
Yeah, no, I'm seeing that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, maybe just to kind of put a different angle on maybe where I think the question is coming from is, it's, again, I think the questions like this I've seen come up pretty often in panel discussions, and I think it's a combination of, really just having so many options available and really just figuring out the best path to go. And I will say, for having been in industry for 10 years, just about it, there's a position for everyone. There's really a type of work that fits, every different personality, every different goal, even, geographical preference and all of that. And so to just echo Alex and Viva, it really depends on the field that you choose to go into. Like for medical writing, 80% or so are PhDs. You know, some of our masters, and a lot of there aren't the minority is the bachelor's background. But you know, for marketing, you don't necessarily need a PhD. I've rarely seen, you know, folks in commercial or marketing with a PhD. I see a lot of MBAs, and so it really depends on which niche that you think your skills and your personality would enjoy, you know, being in, and really kind of tailoring your background and your credentials to set yourself up for success in that field. You know, I think because these questions come up pretty often, I've actually started writing a book, and so we're nearly done. But you know, we've started writing a book. My best friend from grad school, we're really writing a book about career and the best fit and how to get you to your perfect, you know, niche in your career. And so because for us it was such a big black box coming out of academia, like what is out there? We don't know. Academia, the track is pretty, you know, fairly, you know, standard. You go through your postdoc and your assistant professor and tenure professorship, but industry and government, it's really unknown, right? So we've really tried to highlight not only the positions that are out there in that book, but really the type of personalities and your desires and your you know, the right fit and your right tribe, so to speak, to get to those positions. So I think this question, you know, is pretty typical in terms of, you know, how do I get to be a successful, you know, to a successful position in industry? I think that's a pretty typical question. And, you know, the short answer is there's really a position for everybody, but you really have to just kind of figure out what your personality is, what sort of position you want, and how to go for that and set yourself up.
Great, thank you all for that insight. We have another question from Kat about what are trends in this industry and what big changes do you see in the future of biotech? What things are becoming increasingly important in the way that your companies run?
Ooh, I can maybe take a stab at that one. Right now in the immediate environment in Madison, and I think this is probably global, is there's quite a shortage of qualified candidates, a lot in the manufacturing and quality areas. So you see here locally at Catalent, even Promega and their CGMP facility, and other places, there's just so many job openings. You know, and even in regulatory or quality areas, it's kind of a big, you know, a big shortage. Now, more, you know, if you step back and you look at the trends in the industry, you see, you know, I lived through the original cloning biotech 80s, which was kind of slow and boring, and then PCR came in, and next thing you know, you know, we got some really powerful tool to look at amplifying DNA for diagnostics and other purposes, and then you get into high throughput screening. Then from there you go to microarrays, and then you go into sequencing, and now you're into, you know, more of the siRNA and cell therapy, gene and cell therapy space. So to me, the future is, you know, is cell therapy, it's regenerative medicine, and then making tools and kits and therapies that fit into that kind of new environment. But it's all about understanding the business, the process, the manufacturing, and supporting that to get it to the patient. I mean, it's all about how do you do that. So you know, I don't know how you necessarily prepare yourself other than jump in. And I know the Masters in Biotech, I think it's been a wonderful program. It's probably 20 years now here in Madison, and you know, it gives you a really good broader perspective on all the different things that happen in the industry and you know, in companies in general. For us, we just like go-getters, risk takers. You know, you come in, you can wear 8 hats. You know, you can you know, everything changes every day, so you got to be good at adapting, things like that. Maybe larger companies, maybe need a different skill set than that. But don't discount small companies. They're pretty fun.
Honestly, I
would
have to say,
second.
oh yeah, that I feel like I keep cutting
Go
Jennifer
ahead, Amy.
off.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I'll let you go first this time for once.
We'll go, Amy, you can go ahead, and then Jennifer will make sure we get your input after.
No, I really just want to echo what Alex was saying about culture and kind of, different small versus big companies. I mean, I think the stereotype is there for a reason. Bigger companies tend to be a little stuffier. And there is some more red tape. Not that I'm saying, smaller companies don't have red tape and there's no politics there, but I think, smaller companies do have that, work hard, play hard culture for the most part. So, I think personally, I like things like borderline inappropriate and like really fun, and I think, smaller companies can have that kind of culture. And so, I think when I was graduating in 2009, the advice that I got pretty often was shoot for the biggest company and, you can choose where you go from there and just kind of, I guess, trickle down from there. In retrospect, I'm not sure that that's so true anymore. I think there's a ton of micro pharma, which I would categorize as kind of less than a few hundred people would be micro pharma. But, my company is 3,000 people. And so some would consider that small, especially coming from Bristol Myers or, Amgen, where there were, at least 200,000 employees there. So it could either range from really big pharma to small pharma, and biotech too. But I think the trend is that there's a lot of startup companies that are out there. And also there's a lot of new niche-based positions out there. The FDA and the European regulatory health authorities and other across the globe, a lot of health authorities are getting, they're really getting strict about standards and guidelines and really following good clinical practice, or just being transparent and very ethical and being very airtight in terms of the data that companies present out in the public forum. Those are all new guidelines and new regulations, and they're constantly coming out. I feel like there's a really big increase and a push for that. So, with that comes a lot of regulatory niche positions. Like for me, I'm part of medical writing and transparency, but the transparency piece didn't exist within the last 5 years. I see more and more of the transparency piece coming out. There's also patient advocacy oriented groups where, it's really questioning the clinical trial designs down to, do we really need placebo in some cases? Can we use statistical powering to overcome, the need for placebo when patients are at their deathbed and they don't have any options? So different questions in the regulatory space create different positions. Even health economics, that wasn't a field that was all that well known or popular until the last 10 years, right? So, I think there are new fields that come about every day as a result of, heightened regulatory requirements. And they don't have to be all boring because of the word regulatory in there, but, it could create a transparency, niche in marketing or, some other space down the road, who knows, but more and more, I think the positions are getting very highly specialized and niched. So that's kind of the trend that I've been seeing over the last 10 years.
Thank you, Amy. We'll go Jennifer next.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to add to what Amy and Alex said, I'd like to reiterate something Alex mentioned, which is that at least in the life science tools industry right now, there is, as Alex described, a major shortage in manufacturing and quality positions. Their positions is not necessarily what most people have stereotyped in their head. So I'd encourage people to spend some time looking into these. There is a lot of problem solving and using other skill sets into them. It's not just like pipetting stuff into a tube or reviewing boxes and such. It's more involved and much more fun than that. But the other thing I would say as far as trends is there is this big push to pull a lot of data in. And so bioinformatics is a growing area to pull in tons of data, whether it be genomics, proteomics, transcriptomics, metabolomics, pulling that all in to gain an understanding of disease and just pathways in general. So that's another trend that I do not foresee declining as far as companies needing people with that background and that skill set in the future. I think that's only going to grow as we continue to evolve and learn.
Great, thank you all for that insight. That's super helpful. We have about 10 minutes left, so I just want to, if students have questions, please put them in the chat now or raise your hand. We want to make sure if you have those questions that we're able to get them answered today. And if not, I have a final question for our alumni. What is one final piece of advice you would give to students who are hoping to start in or are continuing their journey in the biohealth and biotech field?
Okay, well, I'll start. Honestly, when you're starting in the field, whether, presumably in some kind of career or job, at the entry level as a fresh graduate, typically, in my experience, employers are not looking for people who have a wealth of experience and can go in and do every element of their job immediately. So one thing that I think is really, really critical when you first start looking for a job in a field, especially if you have limited to no actual experience outside of your education, is being trainable and being open to having that mentorship and seeking out that mentorship. Being in the industry, you can learn a lot very quickly if you seek out the correct people and align your personality to ensure that you are absorbing that information as best as possible. I'm one of those people that I can very easily get to a point where I'm, resilient to people trying to tell me what to do, like I can figure it out, I got it figured out. But being trainable is such a valuable asset, and you'll go so much farther in your career with any sort of path you decide to take if you're willing to listen to the expertise that's around you, because there's going to be a wealth of expertise around you going into any size company, whether it's over there with a startup or over here with PPD. So there's tons of opportunity to just be trainable and listen and hear what's going on around you and paying attention to that expertise and knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the final thing for me is don't be afraid to ask folks in the industry about, spending some time on the phone or in a video chat and talking to them. I mean, even if it's just a cold call, if you just use LinkedIn or something and just say, hey, listen, I noticed you're involved in this, that, and the other thing, and would you have some time to talk to me? I'm so-and-so, I'm a student, I'm graduating. I want to kind of know how your company is or how your job is. I mean, don't be afraid to do that. I think we're all willing to spend time doing that. It's fun. It's helping folks along in their careers. I didn't do that enough when I was younger because I didn't really know who to ask. Well, we didn't have the social media and all the connectivity, right? It's almost like you'd have to, I don't know, look through some paper, something, and then dial a phone. It's you can't just go online and look on LinkedIn and say, ooh, quality jobs, and then boom, there's 100 of them just staring you in the face. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, and to add to what Alex is saying, I think when I was graduating, I just felt so unworthy in terms of, real world experience. And I just always wondered, like, well, who's going to hire me? If everyone wants 1 to 3 years of experience, who is getting this? It was such a catch-22 that, I felt like I was just waiting for someone to take a chance on this, newly graduating, fresh student. And really, when I look back, grad students or undergrads, you bring a lot of talent to the table. And when I do interview folks who don't have as much experience, I do look for that trainability, the energy, the enthusiasm to learn. And that goes a really long way. And, just remember that your training did give you a lot of good experience and a way of thinking, like, especially for grad students, it's just a different way of thinking. When you come out with a PhD, you're constantly thinking at, approaching problems with the why question, right? Which a lot of folks, don't necessarily do really. So you're taught good science, you're taught how to troubleshoot, you're taught how to, think really fast and get over the learning curve real quick. And really it depends on your personality and what you're good at, but you bring those technical skills too. So, just have the confidence and the enthusiasm to learn and grow. And again, there's a position out there for everyone. You just really need to figure that out. And that's, I guess, the other half of the equation is, just remember that you're worthy, you're very worthy. And then remember that your skill sets and your personality are more than worthy for the position that you're fit for. And so, not to shamelessly, talk about my book over and over, but we really wrote the book so that we can help folks or help students get to that fit position. Because a lot of times students do the shotgun method where they apply for everything out there thinking, I'm going to just get one of the positions, and that's really inefficient. I mean, I wasted 6 months of my life doing that until I really sat down and figured out, what am I good at? Okay, it's writing, it's data, and it led me to medical writing naturally. So, our book, it's called The Perfect Science Career, and it will lead you down that path. Like, we start with a personality assessment, then what sector you want to go into, what types of positions would be fitting for you, and we give you a whole list of positions that you could go into and be perfectly happy, which in turn will give you a lot more money. And so, don't forget that you can ask for the fit for you and make the position come to you once you figure out what you're really good at and what you want to do. So that's kind of my last advice.
So the only thing I'd like to add is, regardless of whether you are an undergrad or a grad student, now is the time to take opportunities to do internships, do job shadows, reach out, make connections, participate in events like this. There's so many ways to learn and figure things out. One thing that I think is really important is any opportunity, even if it's exploring something you're not super interested in, or if you're really interested in, you think this is going to be your career path, take a chance, learn little bit more. You may learn you hate it. You may learn you love it. So, now is the time to really do that exploration.
I think we might have lost Jennifer. She's signing in right now. You can let her finish her thought. Jennifer, are you able to hear us? You cut out quite a bit there at the end. Would you be willing to just say that last sentence again?
Yeah, I can. I'm not exactly sure where I got out, but take the opportunities to explore. You may find you like something, you may find you hate something. Even if you hate something, it's a good learning opportunity.
Thank you so much for that. All right, we have about 2 minutes left. So I just want to say thank you to all of our alumni for being here today. I think this is a very fruitful and insightful career panel. And Mike put in the chat, SuccessWorks has some resources directly related to networking. We have more Taste of Success series coming up, as well as we speaking to the mentoring and just informational interviews point that was made. We've launched a new program called Career Conversations and kind of taken some of that guesswork out of finding alumni. And I think many, if not all of our alumni in this call are a part of that program. So we would encourage students to look at our website, take that 30-minute Canvas course. And if you're interested in having a conversation further with any of our alumni today, you can connect with them that way.